Come on in, guys. Welcome to Idled Out, where we talk all things Survivor. My name is Luke, and today we're talking about the 10 players screwed the hardest by advantages. Season 11 to Season 29, there were pretty much no advantages in the game outside of immunity idols. The advantage era began in earnest in Worlds Apart with Dan Foley's extra vote. And over the next 5 years, nearly every season gave us a new and exciting advantage, whether that be the steal a vote, steal a reward, legacy advantage, or idol nullifier. It all reached a fever pitch in Island of the Idols, a season so saturated with advantages that I genuinely had trouble keeping track of who had what throughout the season. Still, I generally like advantages. They help keep the game fresh and are often quite fun. And they're at their best when they require skill to obtain and good deduction to use. But that doesn't mean advantages haven't screwed people over. I've already covered the 10 players screwed the hardest by twists in the game. Now it's time to cover the 10 players screwed the hardest by advantages. At number 10 is a 2-for-1 deal, Devon and Alan in Survivor Heroes vs. Healers vs. Hustlers, screwed by a cross-tribal vote block in the Triple H pre-merge. After the tribe swap in this season, the new Levu consisted of 2 heroes, 2 healers, and 1 lone hustler. That lone hustler, Devon, was most definitely going to be the swing vote at Tribal Council, as neither heroes nor healers wanted to give up any ground, and both sides were jockeying for Devon's vote. But Jessica put the kibosh on that all the way from another tribe with a vote block advantage she found a few days earlier, which could only be used at the next Tribal Council regardless of if she was at it or not. This was given to Devon as if it were an advantage to him, a gift that he could only open at Tribal Council, and when he does open it, he gives us one of modern Survivor's greatest quotes.
That is not an advantage.
Without a vote, the heroes and healers tie, but Joe places idol and successfully idols out Alan. It's tough to say what might have happened if Devon had his vote. Would he have voted with the heroes? Would Joe still play his idol? Who knows? But Devon's vote block misfortune was a sign of things to come for him, as later on he'll get twist screwed right out of a seat at Final Tribal Council when Final 4 Firemaking appears out of nowhere. Geez, some guys have all the luck. Bad luck. The 9th most advantage screwed player in Survivor history is Tyson in Winners at War, screwed by Jeremy's safety without power. This advantage let Jeremy just leave Tribal Council before voting started, allowing him to stay safe, but also to not cast a vote. And I'd like to start off by saying that I certainly don't blame Jeremy for using this when he did. At the Tribal Council he used it, he was definitely going to get the votes, so he read the room correctly and absolutely made the right play. I mean, what was he supposed to do? Not use it and get voted out?
It's not an immunity necklace nullifier, is it?
But him unexpectedly leaving Tribal Council, a completely unprecedented event, sent the entire tribe into a whispery pandemonium. Eventually, the majority alliance just settled on Tyson, in part because he was the Edge of Extinction returnee, and in part because he was the quote-unquote biggest threat on that side. If Jeremy doesn't use this advantage, he gets voted out here, and it's entirely possible Tyson goes the next round anyway. But with the fluidity of that season, I think Tyson might have lasted longer. Instead, he was sent right back to the Edge of Extinction. The 8th most advantage screwed player is the entire Raro tribe in Survivor Cook Islands, screwed over by the most powerful advantage in Survivor history, the Super Idol. Unlike other non-Super Idols, this immunity idol can be used after the votes are read, basically requiring 0 read on the game to play accurately. It's essentially a get-out-of-jail-free card, and even though it was never played, it completely screwed all of Raro, who entered the merge with the numbers but lost Jonathan, who flipped to Yule's side when Yule showed him the idol. Of course, Penner mutinied to Raro in the first place because he believed Adam had the super idol, so I see how the point can be made that Raro was going to lose the showdown at the merge regardless. Still, the super idol is frustratingly impossible to play against, and requires the majority alliance sacrifice one of their own just to flush it. We'll never know what a super idol-less Cook Islands looks like, and Yule's so good at Survivor he probably wins anyway. But his idol was simply too powerful and ensured Raro's downfall. At number 7 is all of the post-merge players sent to Edge of Extinction on Winners at War, screwed over by all the fire tokens Natalie had. Towards the end of the season, it became clear that in some ways, getting voted out of the game first was a huge advantage to Natalie, as it allowed her to accrue a King's Ransom and fire tokens, which she was able to cash in for advantages in the return challenge, an immunity idol for if and when she comes back to the game, an immunity idol for Tyson for if and when he comes back in the game, and a massive jar of peanut butter, an advantage in calories, nourishment, and tastiness. Compare all this to players who had more success in the game, like Nick, Jeremy, and Kim, who competed in the battle back shortly after they were eliminated in the game proper, and who had no fire tokens to buy advantages with, essentially being punished for their own success. Of course, obviously Natalie didn't get all of these advantages by luck. She's a shrewd player and an incredible athlete, and she definitely earned them. But all her fire tokens, combined with how long she was on the edge, completely screwed over other players who played better games and who lasted 10 times longer than she did. The 6th most advantage screwed player in Survivor history is Jason in Island of the Idols, screwed by a vote block in a critical post-swap stalemate. Old Vokai and Old Lyro both have 4 members on this tribe, which, when I look at it now, is probably the most problematic tribe ever assembled. Elaine has a vote block advantage, retrieved in secret during the immunity challenge in what is probably one of the highlights of that season, other than Dean, of course. Elaine busts out the vote steal at Tribal Council, and her alliance begins debating whose vote to steal and who to vote out. Is there anyone in particular you guys want to take out? Anyone at all? Jason's robbed of his vote and pretty much all his agency in the game, and the guy I was certain was going to be the cockroach of the season that snuck his way to the end gets squashed prematurely. Without this advantage, Aaron potentially flips sides, and if he doesn't, Jason is safe on the rock draw and probably goes deep in the game like all his other allies did. Instead, he goes deep in this video. The 5th player most screwed by advantages is Jamal, also from Island of the Idols, screwed by a hanging parchment that he apparently wasn't supposed to grab. So Jamal's wandering around camp and sees a hanging note. Excited, he opens the note, which tells him he's going to Island of the Idols. Alright, even better. Everyone who goes there seems to come back with some sort of OP advantage. I was super hyped for Jamal. Finally, some good fortune on a season where likable characters are in increasingly short supply. But when he gets to IOI, he's told by Rob and Sandra that simply by grabbing the note, he lost his vote at the next Tribal Council, but is given in return a blank piece of pen and paper, which he can use to try and trick another player. Unless you can write in perfect script in the Survivor font, this is unequivocally one of the worst advantages ever. Having your vote for Tribal Council is more valuable than this. Rob and Sandra's lesson for Jamal is that if something seems too good to be true, it probably is, and that the parchment was hanging too openly and he shouldn't have opened it. But literally anyone would grab that parchment and open it. The greatest players of all time would. Parvati would, Tony would, Rob and Sandra would. Later that episode, Jamal is voted out and doesn't even get to cast a vote to try and save himself. Lesson learned. Some say he won't grab parchment hanging from trees to this very day. At number 4 is Dan in Survivor David vs. Goliath, done in by Survivor's first ever idol nullifier. At this point in the game, Dan's doing pretty well. The Goliaths have a comfortable majority over the Davids, and he's still got an idol. The only thing really going against him is that Kara dumped him, but he's a tough guy, he'll get over it.
It's like I make the sacrifice for our tribe, and I get left out of everything, and it's important.
I feel like you're getting emotional.
But the Davids have an arsenal of advantages and pretty much use them all at what turns out to be a pivotal tribal council. After Nick steals Allison's vote, Dan correctly reads the room that he's going to get the votes and rightfully plays his immunity idol on himself. But Carl also played his idol nullifier, an advantage in the game which Dan literally could not have known existed. This nullifier nullifies Dan's immunity idol, meaning all the David's votes for him still count and he gets sent straight to the jury bench. Now, it's hard to be too mad about this because it really is great TV and the Davids are one of Survivor's greatest underdog tribes. I mean, it's literally built into their tribe name. that doesn't mean that Dan wasn't screwed by an advantage that the David slung out of nowhere. I imagine that Dan wasn't long for the game anyway, and the Goliaths probably would have turned on him sooner than later. But who knows, without the idle nullifier, maybe Dan sticks around and wins Kara's heart back. Can't really do that from the jury. The third most advantage screwed player in Survivor history is Janet, our third and final IOI player, also screwed by an idle nullifier that probably cost her the game. Going into the finale, Janet was undoubtedly the fan favorite, and she had a clear path to the end as well. Use her idol at 5, win Final 4 firemaking, and then sweep the jury vote against whatever combination of Dean, Nora, and Tommy she was facing. Speaking personally, I would have loved a Janet win. Not only because she's awesome, but also because an older woman actually winning the game in the advantage era would be super satisfying. But all that goes out the window when Dean becomes the very last visitor to Island of the Idols, wins an idol nullifier in a coin flip, and unsurprisingly uses it to nullify Janet's idol and her game. You know, it's true what they say. You either die as DK Chillin' or live long enough to become DK Villain. The second most advantage screwed Survivor player is Neil in Survivor Ko-Rong, who served on the Ko-Rong jury from his medical evacuation on day 19 until day 38, when Michelle used her juror removal advantage and sent him home. Neil was taken out of the game by an infection on his leg shortly after the merge, but he was able to serve as jury foreman and spent nearly 3 weeks at Ponderosa attending each post-merge tribal council and getting the inside scoop. But Michelle won a reward on day 38 that allowed her to remove a member of the jury that night. On the one hand, voting out Neil really is the fairest way to apply this advantage, since he was the first member of the jury. But on the other hand, I do feel really bad for Neil, who took his role of juror very seriously. Ultimately, it just feels kinda mean to me to remove someone's ability to cast their final vote, stripping them of their last bit of agency in the game, especially after they've spent so much time attending tribal councils. Neil's vote for Aubrey wouldn't have mattered anyway. She still would have lost to Michelle, but it's still pretty dirty. On his way out the door, though, Neil got his licks in on Michelle anyway.
You came to this game thinking you're a badass bitch, but you're more like a cute little puppy. You're still suckling at the teat, and I don't think you stand a chance.
That is some salty ice cream. The player most screwed by advantages in Survivor history is Cirie in Survivor Game Changers, screwed at Final 6 by default in what has come to be known as Advantage Get-In. Okay, fast forward to Final 6 of Game Changers. Ty and Troyzan have 3 idols between them and have held onto them for practically the whole game. Sarah also has a legacy advantage that she got from Sierra, and Brad has immunity. Do you see where this is going? At Tribal Council, Troyzan plays his idol for himself, Ty plays his idols for himself and Aubrey, and Sarah plays her legacy advantage. With Brad immune as well from an individual immunity win, that leaves Cirie as the only person eligible for votes, and despite coming into the game with one of the biggest targets and having no votes cast against her the entire game, Cirie is sent home by default. This is the only time in Survivor where I really felt like the show was collapsing in on itself. That anyone would get removed by default because they didn't have an advantage sucks. That it's a universally beloved player like Cirie makes it an even tougher pill to swallow. Thankfully, Survivor actually learned from this experience, and even though the advantages just keep coming, more and more of them are timed and only able to be used for X number of tribal councils after they're found. You can't really hoard advantages to the end of the game like some sort of 19th century mustache-twirling robber baron any longer, and that's good. But I wish Survivor could have learned this lesson like 1 season earlier. And not that you do, but if you need any proof that Cirie is an all-time great player, look no further than right here. It took 4 advantages just to get her out of the game. Now that is game-changing. Got nothing else for ya. To make my legacy advantage lots of views, like and subscribe, and I'll get you more Survivor content just like this. Until next time, don't get idled out.